Today is December 5th, 2023. It is the 60th day of the war. It is 4:30 p.m. here in Israel, 9:30 a.m. in the United States. And let's get going right into the good news. The good news is that the full IDF has entered the south. This actually happened a day or two ago, but it was only released to the public now. So ironically, Hamas knew before we did, and they entered through the south, through the Pacific Forest, into Gaza. And IDF has identified leaders in Khan Yunis, which is one of the big cities there. The two cities you're going to want to listen for are Khan Yunis and Rafah, are the two big cities in the south that the IDF is going after. Hamas responded by firing rockets at Israel continuously for the last 30-something hours. What's absolutely amazing is that there have only been two slight injuries due to the rocket fire. If you think about a country being bombarded by rockets and only two people being injured, it says a lot for what we're doing, and hopefully the fact that Hashem is protecting us. Hamas is now facing the Kfir Brigade, which is a relatively new unit of the army. It's only probably about 10, 15 years old. This is the first war it is fighting. They are specially trained to locate and destroy tunnels. They're destroying tunnels in a number of different ways, but usually by bombing it, also by using what are called the sponge bombs, not SpongeBob, but sponge bombs, which go into the tunnel, and a chemical reaction causes them to expand with concrete and fill up the entire tunnel. At the same time, also tunnels have been prepared to be flooded by water from the Mediterranean. The IDF has set up pumps to start flooding tunnels. And again, yesterday we mentioned the fact that over 500 tunnels have already been destroyed, 800 have been identified. The South Gaza has been split into two. This is the usual IDF method of fighting in Gaza. They split everything up into sections. That cuts off Hamas fighters from each other. So half the Hamas fighters in the south are now unable to connect and communicate with the other half, which makes our job much easier. In Jabalia, which is in the north, Israel has entered and is battling over the Hamas headquarters there. There are the numbers that have come out. The IDF yesterday said that about 5,000 Hamas fighters have been killed since the start of the ground invasion. That's very positive. Now, I'm not sure how the IDF gets that number. The IDF was then asked if Hamas's number, which is that 15,000 civilians have been killed. Hamas doesn't differentiate between civilians and its fighters when it releases those numbers. So if you assume that 5,000 of those 15,000 are Hamas fighters, that would leave 10,000 civilians. The IDF commander was asked if that was a possibility, if those numbers could be accurate. Hamas numbers are notoriously not accurate because they're made up. Somebody yesterday did a study that I saw, which showed how every single day, even if during the ceasefire, the numbers were manipulated to show that more kids were dying than adults. So meanwhile, nobody could have died one day, but the numbers yesterday would have showed, let's say, 4,000 children dead out of the, let's say, 10,000. And the next day, the numbers had showed 5,000 children dead. So it wasn't even a serious attempt at hiding the lies that Hamas was putting out there. But the IDF officer was asked if it's possible that 10,000 civilians could have been killed by the IDF, and that would leave a 2-to-1 ratio, two Palestinian civilians for every one Hamas fighter killed. And the IDF officer who answered the question said it's not out of the realm of possibility that could be true. Now, that number could be disturbing to people, that we're killing 2 civilians for every one member of Hamas. But one has to keep in mind that Hamas members are purposely embedding themselves within the civilian population. So that is, it could even be considered maybe a proportionate low number. Relatively low number to what would happen when an enemy force embeds itself inside civilians and then has to be killed. That number is a pretty good number if you're keeping it at 10,000. Obviously, nobody wants anybody innocent to die. Also, innocence is a good question when these people are the same people who celebrated the deaths of Israelis, and poll after poll shows that these people are in support of Israeli deaths. Now, a lot of them are children, so they're obviously not culpable, but it is a fact that these people are not what we would consider innocent. They might not be worthy of death, and that might be a tragedy, and chalk it up to collateral damage. But at the same time, it is not one. These are not people that are walking around saying that they wish that this war had not happened, and that no Israelis had died. They celebrated the Simchas Torah massacre, and that's something to always remember. 11 Hezbollah points were hit by Israel up north by Lebanon, and the IDF says it is beginning operations to knock out terrorists in Syria and in Yemen. So we're talking about knocking out terrorists in Gaza, in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. This is not a simple war that Israel is fighting. Some bad news, unfortunately. Hostages have been the Israeli Health Ministry released that the hostages were all drugged and given tranquilizers before they left, so that they could look happy and calm when they left and not scared. That goes far in explaining why it is that the hostages seem to be in very good moods and chummy with the Hamas terrorists and who would torture them. And the answer would now make sense. It's because they were drugged. The American State Department yesterday said that they are convinced that the reason why 18 women are still being held hostage and were not released, and Hamas went so far as to go back to war so as not to release these people, which means that there must be something really bad about releasing them, must be because they've been abused while held hostage, and Hamas is afraid of that news getting out. One has to ask a question, and this is analysis on my part here, why Hamas cares so much about what the world thinks. Hamas has continuously denied that it killed civilians in Simchas Torah. It's drugging the hostages to make them appear like they're in good shape when we know that they're not after medical examinations. The Hamas is trying to hide these women that are held hostage that were abused in their testimony. So why is Hamas so concerned with what the world thinks of them? It's an important question to ask, and I think the answer is because what Hamas has no chance of winning this war. They know that, but a victory for Hamas would be a premature ceasefire before they are knocked out. That way, they can go to the world and say they went to war with Israel and came out still strong and still alive the next day. The way that Hamas gets Israel to stop the war early will be by making sure that the world pressures Israel to a ceasefire. And the way they do that is by making sure the world doesn't think poorly of Hamas and does think poorly of Israel. So they exaggerate the numbers of civilians killed, not counting their terrorists or counting their terrorists as civilians when they die. And they go ahead and drug hostages and keep hostages in captivity and deny the fact that they killed civilians, all in an effort to win the world's sympathy in order for that to flip on Israel and force Israel into a ceasefire, which would then give Hamas a victory. So that's why Hamas is so concerned with world perception. And just to keep in mind, the hostages, there are 14 children still being held hostage that are under 10 years old. It's unbelievable. And 25 senior citizens who are over the age of 80 are still hostages. In an just inexplicable type of advocacy, Senate Democrats who pretend to be Israel's friend and all call themselves pro-Israel want to condition the aid that President Biden has said that he wants to give Israel for this war, conditioning it on how Israel conducts itself militarily. First of all, this is incredibly hypocritical because the United States doesn't keep to the rules that they're going to demand that Israel keeps to in order to get to this aid. So that's number one. Number two, this would be the only country that America does this to during a war. Number three, this is Israel's war to fight, and the United States' war to choose a side on. By putting conditions on, it's almost helping out Hamas. They're going to pretend that these conditions are made in order to help the civilian population in Gaza, but we all know that this is just is a farce and a way of hamstringing Israel and its ability to fight the way it needs to. It's sad that these Democrats are doing this, and these senators need to be taught a lesson in what friendship and allyship and support means. Okay, let's go to your questions. Shouldn't heads roll after it has been discovered that Israel knew about potential attacks over a year ago? Yes, and heads will roll. People will be held responsible. The director of military intelligence has already resigned, but you can expect a lot more resignations. But it has to wait until after the war is done. How will traveling into Lebanon earlier than expected affect each side? I'm not sure what that means. I think you mean attacking Lebanon. Israel is attacking Lebanon, and that'll hopefully affect Hezbollah's side by being dead, and Israel's side by having less enemies. Why were some people in Bibi's government so keen to end the ceasefire? They even threatened to leave the coalition. So people wanted to end the ceasefire, because they want Hamas dead, and they think that gaining the hostages back is important, but not at the cost of releasing hundreds of terrorists back into Israeli society. So they felt the ceasefire was wrong. So that's too bad. Okay. Now that Israel is heading into the south, where are the Palestinians going to be heading? So the Palestinians are going to be heading, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be there in the middle of the war. And that is Hamas's problem. It's not Israel's problem. Israel gave everybody plenty of notice that this was going to happen. Hamas knew exactly what was going to happen to it when it perpetrated these attacks, and now they're going to have to live with the consequences of it. Again, this war could end today. Hamas surrenders, gives back the hostages, and it's done. Okay, what are the Israeli targets in the south? Targets in the tunnels and hospitals? The targets are anybody that's Hamas and wants to kill Israel. Those are the targets. Are there people on the Gaza side also as cautious about the buffer zone as Israel is? If Israelis go near the buffer zone trying to get inside Gaza, what happens? No, that's not how it works. Israelis don't want to get into Gaza. It's like asking about American illegal immigration into Mexico, and if Mexico is going to build a wall. No one wants to go into Gaza. That's not how it works. No Israeli wants to get into Gaza. If Gaza wants to set up a buffer zone, they're more than happy to. Okay. So what is the Palestinian argument for anti-Semitism and defending Hamas? I don't know what that means. The Palestinian argument for there's no art. I mean, you can't have what do they say? They say that Jews are bad people and that Israelis stole their land and Jews mistreat them. That's what they say. And they say that Hamas is a resistance force that is rightfully defending the Palestinian people. Of course, freedom fighters and resistance forces don't rape, they don't behead, they don't kidnap. And they also, if they want, they usually only resist after trying to come to a peaceful conclusion with their enemy, which they have not done. So the Hamas is not interested, and Palestinians are not interested in peace with Israel. They're interested in creating a Palestinian state that takes the place of Israel. Okay. When the missiles, how does Israel know where to target their air bombs to avoid hitting areas where IDF soldiers are located? So Israel uses, it's an interesting question. Israel uses a lot of technology, using GPS, that every Israeli soldier has. Almost every Israeli soldier, or every Israeli group of soldiers has a computer which can alert them to where they are, and where the enemy is, and where Israeli troops are moving. It's a very sophisticated system. It's obviously top secret. I've seen it, and it's pretty amazing. Okay. When the missiles hit Gaza city to city, is it hitting the entire city? Is it designed specific Hamas spots? No, a missile and a bomb can't. It's not a nuclear missile that hits the entire city. It hits specific locations, usually a building or a tunnel, something of that nature. If Hezbollah thought it was almost impossible and a bad idea for Israel to fly jets over Lebanon, why would Israel take the risk of flying jets over just to prove a point? Now, they want to show Hezbollah, that's a good question, they want to show Hezbollah what will happen to them if they start firing rockets at Israel from Lebanon. Hezbollah might get the idea that they can move. Hezbollah is located in the south of Lebanon. So Hezbollah might think that if they move to the middle of Lebanon, central Lebanon, that Israel won't be able to get there to stop them. So Israel's letting them know, and again, taking a risk for sure, but letting them know that they can get to central Lebanon. That's not a safe place to fire from. What complications would Israel have while taking out Hamas leaders in Qatar? They could get caught. That's happened before, and well, that's the main problem if they get caught. What do you think about the rule that Israelis can only own one gun, and that gun is a pistol, not a rifle? Do you think they should be able to own rifles during times like this? Yes, I would. I think that a rifle, for those that don't know, is a lot more accurate and can shoot further than a handgun, which is also called a pistol. I would much rather. I have a pistol because that's legally what I'm allowed to have. I would much rather have a rifle. As much as it's cumbersome and difficult to walk around with, it's a lot more accurate, and I would feel a lot more comfortable with a rifle. It also holds more bullets. How will Hamas most likely recover after the death of their leader? Well, their leader hasn't died yet, and hopefully hopefully this could be a time where, and everybody keeps saying Hamas is an ideology, it's not a group. That's true, it is an ideology, but it's also an ideology that's made up of people. So we should be able to. If we knock out enough people, we should be able to knock out the ideology, not because the ideology won't exist, that's not physical, but because it won't be maintained by that many people, because nobody will really care about it. Is there any consequence for Hamas if they decide to not show the hostages to the Red Cross? No, Hamas, there's no impact on Hamas. It just shows the world that Hamas is doing something wrong, and that could affect the calculation we talked before about forcing Israel into a ceasefire. What impact has the latest breaking of the ceasefire had on the continuing war in the Gaza Strip between Israel and Palestinian terrorists? Well, the impact that it's had is that more Hamas people have died, and Israel has started the war again. If Hamas commanders die during war, what do you think this means for Palestinians, people who live in Gaza? Do they feel more lost or scared before than they lost the leader? I think that they will feel. Palestinians, Israel starts being able to knock out the real leaders of Hamas, these people will feel that they can't get too far. How do the actions happening in Gaza right now, like tanks moving and soldiers going from house to house, affect what people think about who should own the land, and does it make it harder for the two sides to find a solution? I think that it definitely makes a solution more difficult, but who knows? Maybe it'll create a situation in the future. After the elimination of Hamas and other Palestinian terrorists that allow a solution to be quicker. But in the short run, this will push peace off a lot more. Now that Israel's bombing all of Gaza, how do they prevent IDF soldiers from being secondhand? Okay, so we talked about that. What is Israel doing to prevent Israeli soldiers from not being touched by their bombs? Israel has strategies that it takes to make sure that people don't get hit by bombs. Will Israel need to possibly place sanctions on Lebanon or other Arab countries who dislike them to possibly prevent this event from happening again? Will Israel need to possibly place sanctions on Lebanon? Israel can't place sanctions really on countries. Only the United Nations can, and they won't over Hezbollah. Hezbollah is already sanctioned, so there's not much they could do. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them under this video, and I'll try to answer them in the next video. Okay, let's have peace in our lands, security for our people. Let our soldiers return victoriously, and let our hostages return home safely. Everybody should have a good day.